Sign on. But I really need to go. I'm sorry, sir. Please return to your seat. Come on, lady. Let him go, my neighbor intervened. He's testifying in Congress today. He's nervous. I wanted to strangle him. I'm fine. It's fine. I sat back down, turned up the music full blast, and looked out the window. It had been 7 years since I left Washington, D.C. to embark on this unusual journey. The UN Oil for Food operation had been set up in 1996 to provide for the humanitarian needs of Iraq's civilians who had suffered dramatic shortages of basic necessities under the stringent economic sanctions adopted in 1990 following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. While diplomats jousted for the moral high ground in New York, lecturing one another on international law, those same laws were being violated methodically behind the scenes through an ever-increasing flow of crooked deals that cheated Iraq's civilians out of an enormous share of their country's wealth. Billions had gone missing from right under our nose, and we weren't even sure how many. Soon, this collective fiasco would be investigated by a high-level anti-corruption commission. France, the United States, and Russia would get embroiled in a mutual blame game. Bureaucrats at the United Nations would turn on one another. Hundreds of lobbyists would be called up to defend some 2,300 companies that had broken the law in order to gain favor with Saddam Hussein. The trickle of damning revelations would soon turn into a flood. A judge investigating the fraud in Iraq was killed in an explosion, and several sources used by investigators on the ground mysteriously disappeared. Some influential diplomats, politicians, and other power brokers would go to jail. It promised to be a political bloodbath. Some people blamed me for helping set this whole debacle in motion after I became the first former employee of the UN operation to call for an independent investigation in an op-ed published in the Wall Street Journal the previous month. My intervention had snowballed, and I received myriad requests for interviews, including from CNN, Fox, ABC, the BBC, and many others, most of which I turned down. But when I received the invitation from Congress, I decided to accept. My position at the crossroads of pressing humanitarian concerns, big power politics, and multi-billion-dollar business interests provided an unusual vantage point on the Iraq conflict. While much of the international community was hypnotized by the hunt for Saddam's prescribed weapons, my colleagues and I had our eyes on the human dimension of the conflict. In Iraq, we became familiar with a society in which youngsters had less education than their parents, where the infrastructure was rotten beyond repair, where criminal gangs close to the regime ruled all the country's trade and smuggling routes, and where the only thing that held society together was fear. In 2003, the United States and its allies had set out to create a new Iraq on the ruins of the old one. This ambitious agenda underestimated the damage that had been done to the Iraqi people in the 13 years since the Gulf War. In New York, we saw the institution that was supposed to stand for international order break its own laws for 7 years. The UN Security Council operated much like a drug cartel, fighting over access to Iraq's oil, and in so doing, letting the Iraqi dictator cannibalize his own country in partnership with our most respectable international corporations. A strange conspiracy of silence had prevailed for many years. The Clinton and Bush administrations had been intimately aware of the massive fraud. French and Russian government officials had directly participated in it, as had officials from all over Europe, South Africa, Australia, India, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria, among others. Reuters, the Associated Press, and most news organizations with correspondents in Iraq had ample evidence as well. As did we, the humanitarian community of the United Nations. I was determined to break that silence now, but I couldn't care less how the unfolding scandal ranked in the annals of history. It was merely the third act of a tragic story that highlighted some of the core flaws of our international system and the frightening, corrupting power of the black elixir that fuels the world economy. From the end of the Cold War to the onset of the War on Terror, the Iraq conflict can be looked at as a mirror reflecting the evolving nature of our global political power game. In order to explain what happened, I would need to describe the events and the attitudes that prevailed at the United Nations during this critical era in international affairs, a time during